Welcome to the EI Guru podcast, a podcast completely focused on emotional intelligence. Typically, the first question I get is, what is emotional intelligence? In very simple terms, it's how we manage our emotions in our interactions with ourselves and others. Or put another way, it's being in the right state and not being in a state when under pressure. Emotional intelligence is another label for mindset, and we all know that when navigating those important conversations, we need to tap into our best. I'll be interviewing leaders and experts in this ever-expanding field and sharing the data on why emotional intelligence is the difference that makes the difference in all of our relationships. Remember to share and subscribe to the EI Guru podcast, and if you have any questions, you can post them once you've subscribed. Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to the latest episode of the EI Guru podcast. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by Jessica Pryce-Jones, who's a long-term, I suppose, colleague, but more so friend that I've known for a number of years now. And Jessica's going to give us a bit of background, but Jessica is a coach, a corporate coach working with leaders around the world, and is an author as well. Author a number of books, in fact. One of the first ones I think you wrote, Jessica, was Happiness at Work. And then you wrote Meetings and Workshops for Dummies. And you're getting really close to push the launch button for your latest book, Intuition at Work. So it's a real pleasure to be able to catch up to you prior to hitting the record button and hear all the information about where you are in the world now. You're living in France and your son's just recently married. So one of the three kids is now on their way. And Jess, I think I might just start by just handing it over to you and giving the audience an opportunity to hear about your background and what got you into leadership and your career and the books and your leadership journey, I guess. So there's sort of like a lot of stuff there to fill in, but if you could just do that for me, that'd be amazing.
My mini bio, as it were.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, like a little mini bio.
So I guess that my leadership journey really started, Jim, way back when I got my first job. And I thought, oh, clever me, here I was, got a job in the investment bank. And as I walked up the stairs on the first day, my heart had this horrible lurch. And actually, the very interview that I'd done, I thought, I just don't fit here. But, it was the status, the reputation, the money and everything that got me in there. And looking back on it now, I was going, how did I miss all those intuitive cues? Anyway, I wound up working for an alcoholic. There's a guy called Miles.
Wow.
And and it was a nightmare. I was in St. James's in London. And I used to run around St. James's Square going, oh, I wonder if I could get a little bit hit by a bus, because if I got a little bit hit by a bus, I wouldn't have to be here.
That's excellent. I love that.
And so that was the beginning of it. And I lasted 9 months. I lasted 9 months in that job.
Before you were hit by a bus or hit by Miles?
Miles and miles. Before I quit, because I just couldn't keep doing it. And I went out, and it was a huge incentive for me to go and find another job where I was really happy afterwards. But after that, I worked in the city for about 10 years or so. And in the end, I did love what I was doing, and I found exactly the right boss for me. But unfortunately, I got pregnant with my now married son, and I wasn't allowed to work part-time. And so I thought I need to do something else. So I did a psychology degree. Basically, one of my drivers was to try and understand why I'd worked really hard for some people and absolutely wanted to kill a few others. And, what had made that happen? So where did motivation sit? And that was the beginning of my journey. So we're now, fast forward 30 years later.
So that got you into psychology, the search for what made and created great leaders and the not so good ones, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what did you discover?
Well, I guess it's so individual because you have to find the person that works for you.
Sure.
So, it's what did I discover? And I think that, well, one of the things that led me then to my first book was, what makes you happy? And that's such an individual thing, but what makes you unhappy? So I guess it's like the Tolstoy quote, every family is unhappy in its own way. Every person at work. So if you don't like your boss, you're going to be unhappy. If you don't like a
Yeah.
key colleague, you're going to be unhappy. If you fundamentally don't think what you're doing is worthwhile, you're not going to be happy. So there are some key things that fall into place, but then there are some peripheral ones as well. So, do people trust you? Do you feel respected? Do you feel a sense of purpose in what you're doing? So
Yeah.
those are three things that I would say are pretty fundamental to doing any job. Unless you're doing it just for the cash. And if you say, right, I'm going to work down the local pub because actually what I'm really called on to do is to help in some voluntary organization, then you know what your purpose is. It's one
Yeah.
is the means to another.
That's interesting that you talk about purpose, because it's a really big question that so many people on the planet don't ask. So, well, I
Yeah.
think going through our stages of life, when we become an adult, we maybe start, and for me personally, the first time I really started to consider what was it all about was when my eldest daughter was born, so my first child. And I thought, okay, so what is all this about? What is, like, why am I here? What am I here to do? And that was the first time I really sort of started thinking about, okay, so what's my purpose? And actually, so many people on the planet aren't really fully in tune with what their purpose is. And it doesn't have to be something, really grand and, earth shattering. And it could be that your purpose is to be a phenomenal parent, for example. It could be that you want to, well, for me, for example, I feel as though I found my purpose 20 odd years ago, and it was to help people with their self-confidence and self-esteem. So of course I ended up being a coach. And it's no wonder that actually that linked beautifully for me to be able to then go and work with individuals that needed support with their self-confidence and self-esteem. Hey, presto, I love what I do. So,
Mhm.
it really helps being aligned with your purpose. But it's a really good piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So I
Mm.
guess you almost sort of tripped into doing what you do now as a coach, and it sounds like you found your purpose,
Totally. Yeah,
by
absolutely.
following, by sort of almost being pushed out of the corporate world into your own thing, which is coaching, and you being the master of your destiny.
Yeah, and I'd never have got it. My husband got a job in Brussels back in the 90s, and I was furious with him and went screaming every step of the way. And then after 6 months, I went, I really like this place. And oh wow, I've got a wonderful job. And hmm, I've never had it so good.
Wow.
And that's when I started working for myself and fell into it really was. I did, you are totally right. I fell into this life because I
Yeah.
think when we started doing it, wasn't such a known path. It wasn't
No,
such a clear
definitely not.
pathway.
Definitely not. And actually, I always talk about, I tripped over into coaching myself as well. So I was in the corporate world selling drugs, the legal
As you do.
stuff. Yeah, the legal stuff, as you know, with AstraZeneca. And then literally couldn't get a job at the level that I wanted to, because I was moving from one part of the country to another. And a friend said, do you want to join Speakers International? And then that was it. I was in, and then the rest is history, as they say. But
Yeah.
but let's just rewind a little bit before the book. So before Happiness at Work,
Mhm.
you were very heavily engaged in a thing called Making Slough Happy. So that was a series that was, I think, shown on one of the TV. I'm not sure if it was BBC or one of the other big channels. So tell me a little bit about that and how you got involved in that. So and what were the outcomes? Making Slough happy. So when you go down the M4, I think it is, you go past Slough, and you don't really necessarily want to stop. And that's no disrespect to Slough, but I've been around parts of Slough, and I wouldn't say it's the best part of the world, but I'm sure there are great pockets of it. So I don't want to disrespect anyone that lives in Slough. But tell me about that project and what you've learned from that.
You know, it was a real coincidence how that thing turned up. And by the way, I think that coincidence is part of intuition. It's a marker that, you know, keep doing this thing. For me, that's how I
Yep.
experience
Yep.
coincidence. So my friend Jane was hosting a dinner, and I was exhausted, and I thought, oh God, I really don't want to go. It's one Saturday evening. And I got in the shower and I think, my whole body's aching with fatigue. I just don't want to go. And then I thought, okay, but imagine, you know, Jane has invited everybody. She's shot the whole thing, she's cooked the whole thing, and she's even now getting it all ready. If that was me, I'd feel hurt if I was to now ring up and say, I'm not coming. So I
Yeah.
thought, pull yourself together, woman. Get your glad rags on and off you go.
Girl up.
And exactly. And so I did, and I met. We just started chatting to somebody there who, and she had tons of energy. This woman had tons of energy. Someone called Patricia Llewellyn, Pat Llewellyn, and she found Jamie Oliver. So
Okay.
I thought, let me just chat with this woman because she's got all the energy. I can just sit and absorb and feel regenerated by her energy.
Hey, and by the way, this is unusual for you not to be bouncing in with tons of energy. You're Tigger's sister. So it's almost like, it's unusual that you don't go bounding in with all that energy. It's like, well, hey, I'm here.
So there was Pat, and she was chatting to me, and I asked her how she'd found Jamie Oliver and talked to her about her business because she ran this production company called Optimum. And then she asked me for my phone number, and I told her I was a coach and what have you. And she asked me for my phone number and email, and I gave them to her. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I got this mystery email 2 days later saying, "Could you call me?" And I thought, oh, she's looking for a coach. Anyway, she asked me to go for a screen test, and that's how it happened.
Wow.
So I did a screen test, and then I said, you know what? It's better if the two of us. So I took a colleague along because you can bounce off someone else. So telly's very dull when the thought process of somebody behind camera isn't available. But when there's two of you, you can say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, or what do you reckon? And so anyway, they liked the pair of us, and I think they called us the Trini and Susanna of Slough. I'm not sure about that as a felt a bit
Yeah.
backhand. Anyway, the funny thing was about that program, it was called Making Slough Happy, but my God, it was an unhappy making process because it was exhausting. We were on, it was like we'd be doing 20-hour days and the camera crews would change, but we in front of the camera couldn't change. And
Yes.
then they were paying a per diem and they didn't want to kick you into the next day. They'd rather you did one incredibly long day
Oh,
than
they
take
they
two
they
per
milked you
diems.
for they really whipped you.
They did.
So
Anyway,
so what was the structure and what was the outcome? So how long did it last? And what were the outcomes from that program?
so I guess that it lasted about 6, 7 weeks, the actual filming. And what we had to do, or our mission was to take some people and groups of people and see could we, by doing a whole host of different interventions, help them on their happiness journey. And we did a pre and a post measure. And the answer is, of course, that if you give people a lot of attention, of course they're going to become happy. I mean, it's a bit the old Hawthorne effect, wasn't it? Didn't
Yeah.
like to say that at the time, though. Kept quiet about that one at the time. But the best bits of the show, as far as I was concerned, and what Philippa and I did, was working with a few individuals, and we really made a difference. Well, we helped them make a difference to their own lives, and that was the work that I was proudest of. And it didn't make the cutting room. I know
Right.
it was left on the cutting room floor.
Right. Okay.
Um, and I kept saying, look, is this reality TV? And they kept going, no, it's documentary. But actually, in the end, it was reality TV. And so the real gritty stuff they didn't really want.
But
But
you had an impact on the people that you were working with. So
yes, And I'm
That in
still in touch
itself,
with some of them. I'm
yeah,
still in touch with some of them.
that's lovely. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
So
did that then spurn the thought, or was the Happiness at Work book already underway at that stage? Give me, because
yes,
I've not spoken about this with you before, Jess. So
it was already in process. There had been a really seminal book published, and it was just about the time that all the happiness stuff was coming to a fore. And as a psychologist, I was really interested in it.
of course,
And
yeah,
and and Martin Seligman, who was the kind of started all of this positive psychology stuff. You know, he was just switching his focus from learned helplessness into positivity and
yeah,
positive, what's now called positive psychology.
mm-hmm.
And so that was, it really grabbed me. And so it was a parallel journey, I reckon.
Yeah,
And I think that I got into the Slough stuff because of my interest.
yeah, yeah. So your energy attracted, so and
Yes,
like energy attracted like
yes,
energy. So birds of the feather flock together, that sort of stuff.
yes. And it was called Making Slough Happy, and they were looking for people who could do this stuff. And so it was almost a natural fit. But it was very unhappy making, because the interesting thing was there were five of us experts, and of course the more airtime one expert had, the less the others had. So everybody was
Yes,
going, "I want to talk," when we
yeah.
were in the room. And I remember passing my colleague Philippa a note just saying, "Keep talking."
Ah, clever, clever, very clever. Okay, so for those listeners that haven't had an opportunity yet to read your book, Happiness at Work, can you just sort of do a little bit of a synopsis of the book? Are there some core chunks of happiness at work? Can you do that for us?
No, Jim, I can't possibly do that for you. I wrote it 14 years
Ah,
but I
what will they get from reading Happiness at Work?
so they'll get a clear framework and lots of how-tos.
Okay, so
So
yeah, but that in itself is good.
yeah,
So a clear framework of creating happier people at
so,
work, is that really what they'll get?
yeah, for themselves. So how do I myself do this for myself, and what can I do if I spot it in someone else? And
Right.
my business, Eye Opener, which is spelled IOPENER, you can go and get a free survey
Okay.
about your own happiness at work if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's eyeopener.com. And the surveys are still out there, data still being collected. And I'm really happy to say that the model and the theory holds up.
Good.
So there was analysis done last year. Does it stick together? Yes, it does. So that's something that I'm quite proud of, because there was an immense amount of research that went behind the whole thing.
Yeah, and you know, before we press the record button, we were talking about, the podcast is called the Emotional Intelligence Guru Podcast, but with an emphasis on not the guru part, because by the way, I am definitely not a guru. I'm I'm not the finished article. I always joke about it because a friend of mine said, yeah, you should be labeled the guru because actually you've lived this stuff, so my life journey, but we've all had a life journey. So that's not the point. The point I'm making is that the focus is around emotional intelligence. Of course, intuition embeds itself into emotional intelligence. And we spoke a little bit about that prior to me pressing the record button. So I want to get into that in a little bit. But going back to the happiness at work stuff, also that blends into emotional intelligence, and I'm just curious to understand, you've worked with lots of leaders around the world, and just your observation of, what a good leader looks like and what a not so good leader looks like in terms of their emotional intelligence, their ability to handle themselves, but also interact with others, so their ability to, and I think about under pressure. So under pressure, that's where the rubber hits the road. So when things are going swimmingly well, it's easy enough to show up and leave a positive fingerprint. But when shit hits the fan, how do they handle that stuff? And I'm sure you've seen examples of that, but I'm just interested to hear perhaps some examples that you've observed over the years, Jess.
So it's really interesting, because I'm part of a not-for-profit organization in the States called the Coincidence Project. And I'm sitting on a committee, and the chairman of the committee yesterday evening reached out. And this morning, when I woke up, I got this wonderful email, "Dear Jess, I'm sensing that." And I thought, oh, Chris, you just read me so right. And I go, there is a man who is really emotionally intelligent,
Yeah.
who is somebody that I would follow. And if he said, right, we're going that way, I go, Chris, absolutely, I'm behind you. And what is it? And it's his authenticity, his vulnerability, his willingness to put himself on the line, to go the extra mile. I mean, Chris Mackey, you're a god.
Yeah. Wow. So
So
he would be a great example of what good leadership looks like, exceptional leadership
yes,
looks like.
yeah.
And what about the not so good versions? So I know we giggled about it before we pushed the record button, but I'm sure I've certainly experienced some. But what are maybe one or two of your examples of the not so good examples?
Oh God.
And you don't have to name them necessarily.
I shan't
I'm
name
not.
I shan't
Yeah.
name names. I shan't name names, but just some examples of behaviors, which is, bad mouthing someone behind their back in front of a group of people. I mean, for me, that's a big no-no, because it's a whole values-based thing. You praise in public and you blame in private.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that just for me is a given. You don't sling people under the bus. I've watched that more times than I care to consider. And it's really interesting. A couple of years ago, I thought I could take one for someone, and I said, it wasn't true, on a call, hands up, that's my fault. I know I own that mistake. Let me put this thing right. It wasn't true. And the woman whose mistake it was on the call with me. And afterwards, she turned around and started giving me some. I go, hang on, this was nothing to do with me. I was taking this for you.
Oh wow. They laid into you and said, yeah, and another thing. Wow, out of
So
awareness. So that's a great example of someone out of awareness.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. So we all screw up, and I think it's absolutely fine. And if this person had turned around and said to me, "Thank you so much for taking one for me,"
Yeah.
I would have said, "Let's not mention it anymore." But you don't forget things like that.
No, God, that's concreted in your that's etched for sure.
Edge. So I think so for me, it's the small stuff. It's
Yeah.
the really small stuff that signals great leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say it's in people say the devil's in the detail. No, the leadership's in the detail.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's some really nice examples there.
Mm.
Okay, so happiness at work, and then meetings and workshop for dummies. So you said that was the quickest book that you wrote, but
Yeah.
again, I guess it says it does what it says on the tin. So it's a very easy, digestible book for if you're looking to run a meeting or run a workshop. Then another great book to grab a copy of.
Yes, and actually, I really enjoyed writing it. So I was asked if I would write it by Wiley. I didn't say, "Hey, I've got this great idea." They came to me, which was
Sure.
I felt, "Ooh, that's too good an opportunity to pass up." And basically, every book is a synthesis of your best ideas, or the ideas that you begged, borrowed, and stolen. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
from other people. Um, some of which you might have come up with yourself, but as we were saying, Jim, what's new under the sun? I really enjoyed writing it just because it allowed me to put so much of what I do onto paper. And so that's why it was so quick to write, because when it's a dummies book, you're just pounding out, here are your 10 top tips, and
Yeah.
do this and don't do that. So
Yeah.
it was easy. It was an easy, and it was a fun book to write, actually.
And then okay, so then fast forward to the you're in a space where you're about to hit the green button for your launch for intuition at work.
Actually, there
Oh,
was one that came before that, Jim.
I'm
I
sorry.
don't. No, no, no. You
I've
wouldn't
missed
know.
one. I've missed one.
You wouldn't
Oh
know.
my
You wouldn't know
God.
because no, you wouldn't know because it's still in my digital drawer. And
Okay.
that's I was asked if I would write a book on leadership for women, and I went to the publisher and I said, hey, listen, this is going to be written Caitlin Moranish style because it was called Breaking Glass. And
Okay.
it was a book about, how do you, if you're a young and aspiring woman going into the large corporate world, how do you have sharp elbows? And I fell out with the publisher because they didn't want me to write it like Caitlin Moran, which was slightly spicy and full of stories from senior women. And they kept saying, no, no, leadership is this noble, wonderful, marvelous, visionary thing. And I'm going, no, no, you don't understand. It's down and dirty in the corridor at midnight. You don't understand.
You
And
need
they
to
kept
roll your
saying,
sleeves up.
and my editor she was quite a young woman at the time, and which probably means she is still a young woman. And she kept saying, no, no, we want more of the visionary thing. And I'm going, but it isn't visionary. That's 1% of the time that's what you're doing. The rest of the time, you're looking at the numbers going, this won't do.
Yeah.
And that performance isn't great. And how am I going to get that over in a way that's palatable, acceptable to this person or this group? So I said, listen,
Using, or in other words, using your emotional intelligence. Yeah.
exactly. So I said, listen, I can't write the book that you want, and you don't want the book that I can write. So let's call it a day.
Wow.
So I've got 75% of that is in a drawer somewhere, and
Okay.
it would be a bit of a different book if I wrote it now, but some of it would be the same.
I love the title, Breaking Glass.
Thank you.
No, but straight away I went to the glass ceiling. Is that what you're talking about? Sort of
Yes.
breaking that glass ceiling of,
Mhm.
and we're slowly getting
Yes.
there, where more and more women are in more senior positions within
Yeah.
organizations. But it's not often that you see that many ladies around the table in a boardroom.
No, still not enough of us there.
It's a shame, and it's going to take time, I guess. It's a bit like, slowly, in a sporting context, the ladies are getting, equal pay for tennis and other sports. Professional
Yes.
athletes, they're starting to get some equal footing,
Women.
but not in the corporate world necessarily.
But are women soccer players paid what men are? No.
No.
Are women tennis players paid what men are? Are women, great sporting heroines? There are still about the clothes they wear. I mean, what is this? Anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah.
But to keep calm.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
Yeah.
That's when you launch Breaking Glass. We'll come back to that. I think that would be another definite addition to the podcast at some point in the future. I'm really keen to get into intuition at work. Yeah. And I sort of read something about you online, and there was something in there, a thread of, and actually you spoke to it initially in the start of the interview, where you had this gut feeling within your first role within your job, and you thought, oh, I don't know whether I really should be here. And it's sort of, that's what you're talking about. It's that but it's funny, but not so funny, that you had that intuition then, but it took you 30 years to then actually then express it into perhaps your writing that you've finished writing with Intuition at Work. So I'm going to hand it over to you and just let you explain, Jess, about the framework, the structure. What is it? Explain what intuition is.
We go back to the start with, where did it all come from? And I think a lot of it's come out of my experience and my experience as a coach, because quite often you say to people, or at least I do, is like, if you had the answer, what would it be? And people will pop out with it. Or what's your gut telling you? What's your hunch about this? What's your intuition telling you? And when you push people, they can quite often do it. And I was coaching someone literally 2-3 days ago, and they were going, oh, well, I don't know whether to go to this one or this one. And actually, I went with this one, and it's been the wrong decision. And I said, tell me, if you change your mind and you go not with option A, but you go with option B, how are you now feeling? And they went, oh, I feel so light. Okay, that's your answer.
Yeah.
Undo the one you've gone with and go back to the one that you didn't go with. And
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. And for me, making a decision is the most important thing. You can undo a wrong decision. And if you work out to be the wrong, it doesn't matter. And you'll know very quickly, because energetically, somatically, emotionally, you'll start feeling what's right and what's wrong. And so I think because we don't talk about this stuff, it doesn't have legitimacy. And so one of my aims is, let's talk about this, let's make it legitimate, because everybody's using it. And you might be, it's like maths, Jim. You might be absolutely phenomenal math genius, and that's great. You're superb at using your intuition, but everyone can add two and two.
Yeah.
And everyone can start recognizing, oh, look, my stomach's done a little lurch, or oh, my fingers are tingling, or oh, I feel really heavy and ugh, about that decision, or gosh, my attention's being drawn to this all the time. What is that? Or a metaphor's popping into my head. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
So you just start to notice, and I think you're quite right. It's the self-awareness piece. And so my aim in all of this is to bring intuition out of what I call the broom closet, and let's share what this thing is, accept that we use it, and be intentional about what we're doing.
It's really interesting that you talked about your colleague that gave you the feedback, and they said that they were sensing, feeling, which is a really good way of sort of almost like sending a fishing rod out to sort of explore whether that was real for you. So,
yes,
because you could have come back to them and said, actually, no, that wasn't how I was feeling or thinking or whatever at the time, and they got it wrong. So that's how you get better. That's one way of getting better at intuition, isn't it? So you go fishing for those cues. So you're sensing something and you say, actually, I'm not sure if are you okay with this? How are you feeling about this particular direction that we're heading in?
yeah, absolutely, totally. And I think that's what I would class as social intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a kind of tribal animal. And so these cues that other people give off, we're mostly pretty sensitive to. Chris, in what he does, that is part of his job. And I guess, you too, Jim, as a coach, you're pretty hyper aware of what's going on for other people. So now it seems, would it be a good moment to talk about the different kinds of intuition that I think
Please.
are
Yeah, 100%. And I know we'll be able to share some of the framework and the model for those people that are going to be listening to, not just listening to, but perhaps watching the video as well. So you can walk us through that if you can, Jess. That would be great.
Sure. And these don't come just from me. This is research. So in putting the book
Sure.
together, I have read literally hundreds of papers so that nobody else has to. And
Yep.
it's interesting because there isn't the Journal of Intuition, the International Journal of Business Intuition doesn't exist. So I've had to go trawling through a really wide range of papers, which from psychology to neuropsychology to neurophysiology, etc., looking at everything that's out there. So for me, there's kind of contextual intuition, which is your social stuff that's going on, and what you can perceive in your environment. And it might be, you walk into somebody's office and maybe they've moved something from one place to another. And you go, you notice it and you start going, is that a cue that I need to pay attention to for something? So it's what you're perceiving.
Yeah.
So that's kind of out there, contextual. And then we've got.
So can I just pause you there for a second? In my little brain straight away goes to, so is that environmental? Is that when you say contextual, you're talking about, that's the environment intuition. So your intuition around the environment. So
The
things
environment that
changing.
you're in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You might walk into a meeting and, I always sit on the right hand of someone and suddenly I'm not.
Yeah.
And so you go,
yeah, you're at the other end of the room.
Yeah, you're cued. You're cued. you know, is this something to be alert to?
Yeah. And of course, some people will completely miss that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then there's really decisional stuff, which is the thing that you have to do as a leader. So this is the first bit, is you'd have to take in information, so what's going on in your environment with the people and the things that you're working in, and then there's the decisional stuff. So the decisional stuff is generally around your area of expertise. You know, you've spent a long time developing this area of expertise. But actually, I was talking to a senior nurse who said to me, and it was one of her, she was teaching, she said it's one of the things that she knows whether someone is cut out or not cut out to be a medic is, can they walk into a room, look at a patient and go, huh, this is all fine tickety boo, or I think something else might be going on, regardless of the readouts that I'm getting. So that's how you build your expert intuition, which is kind of domain specific. It's in the domain that you know, which is why it's so hard when you move from one type of industry into another. You don't have any domain expertise. But then there's also the, you know, you're non-expert. And I think that that's what we rely on quite a lot as coaches. You know, we are not expert in someone else's world, but you can still go, ooh, from what you're saying, I'm not interpreting this as a benign situation. Or from what you are saying, I am interpreting it as a benign situation. And I think there's a story going on here.
Yeah. So it always comes back down to language, doesn't it? So that's where it's quite handy, even if we're not an expert. So that's why coaching does work in a lot of contexts, because you don't have to be the expert in that field to actually be able to coach someone around the field that they are operating in.
And if you think about, you know, what makes a successful middle manager, they are not generally experts in this, in everybody's job.
Yeah.
That's the thing you have to let go of. And if you want to be the expert, that's what will trip you up. So there's non-expert. Then the next one is temporal. You know, is this the right moment to do something, or is it not the right moment? And as we know, in the corporate world, in fact, timing is everything.
Yeah.
So there's temporal, then there's ethical. And ethical for me is this the right or the not right thing to do? And that again, it's always a gut feel. And because some things are so close to the edge, but you know when it's close to the edge. I mean, you really do. So that's on the decision front. And then you've got, on the innovation front, you've got two kinds, which is creative intuition and generative intuition. And just to say a bit about creative intuition, most people think they don't have a creative bone in their body and that belongs to other people. But there's a lovely study looking at what CEOs did and the type of intuition that, one of the types of the intuitions they use most is creative intuition, because that's all about projecting into a future which doesn't yet exist.
Yeah.
And saying, right, that's where we're going. And quite often, although there's some data in there, that it isn't a landscape where you can go, this is absolutely right and we know it's going to work, or it won't. There's a lot of gut work in there. So those are the different kinds of intuition that I've been able to identify.
Just remind me of the other bit of the creative bit. I got the creative intuition and there was another piece around
Generative, so it's
generative.
ideas.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
and I forgot team intuition. Oh, silly me. Team intuition sits in the, uses all of it. It uses the context, it uses the decisions, and it uses this, you know, innovative stuff. So it uses all of them. And then that's what you're doing it as an individual in a collective situation. So you're
Yeah.
doing with other people.
Go
Everything.
on. What I love about this is it reminds me of how I tend to talk about personally as a coach. I tend to talk about intuition as using your spidey senses, because
Yeah.
they go bing, you know, it's almost like it lights up. There's a signal. And so some of us are very good at sort of saying, okay, well, I'm sensing something, and they check in with themselves and they pull on that piece of thread and sort of say, okay, well, they're curious and they ask questions. Whereas others, they'll get the ping and then they'll just dampen it down because they're on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So is there an aspect of as you develop your intuition, is there an aspect of attempting to get leaders to just slow down and tune in? So tune into those feelings, that creating more self-awareness first, so that you can then hone in and develop that. And curiosity, of course, as I say, curiosity is a big thing in my head. For great leaders are curious, so they just continue to ask questions.
Yeah. There's one more thing to add. I want to be super clear that this isn't about abandoning data. I mean,
Sure.
this is about saying, right, we've got the data. It's data and the intuition can come before the data, or the data can come before the intuition.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which order they come in. And I interviewed Zach Brown, who is CEO in his Formula One in the McLaren. And he said, it's really important to recognize it doesn't matter which one comes first, but you use both, and you oscillate between the two, and you use one to deliver the other. You don't entirely rely on one thing, unless there simply is no data and there is no information. So like at the beginning of COVID, we didn't have any information, didn't have any data. What was left? So in volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous situations, what you got? And it's no good saying, we're going to wait until we get 6 months of data.
Of course, because you're then dead in the water.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help anyone, and that doesn't support, ongoing, organizational health.
No. But so going back to slightly, what is this thing that we're talking about? A definition that I use is a feeling of knowing.
I like that.
And I came to that, and I'm not the only person to say it. But it gives you the somatic stuff, your body stuff, and your cognitive stuff. What's going on in your head, and of course it is fast and it is unconscious. Whereas when you're doing, I don't know, Excel spreadsheet analysis, it's not fast and it's very conscious as you're going, okay, what goes in this cell and what's my formula again? So it's fast, unconscious, but it's there and available to you, and it's something that's, we experience it all over. It's gut, it's heart, it's skin, it's I mean, it might be. I was working with one person who was saying, I said, where is your intuition? And she said, it's in my gut. And I said, well, could you just show me where your gut is? And she pointed at her throat.
Oh, wow.
And I absolutely know what she means, because you get a relaxed sensation. Or lots of people talk about it's a relaxed throat or tight throat if it's wrong. And so, what we refer to as our gut can be in very different places for us as individuals. And I was working with one guy in India, and he was saying to me, I want to be conscious of what's going on at the back of your knees. I go, nothing. But if he didn't like that to use gut and use heart, because he thought that quite often we use them incorrectly.
Right. Okay.
And so you can start to be aware of other parts of your body which are also speaking to you, as it were.
Yeah, I really do believe that we've closed down intuition, over the years, and in the last 20 or 30 years, remarkably so, because of the pace, because it's all fast paced. So less and less intuition comes into play. But actually, what I'm really loving about this conversation, Jess, is the fact that it's a definite and for sure, that's something that I've had, a lot of people that I've worked with one-on-one and team in a team dynamic as well, where, getting them to check in and just slow down. I'm almost certain you'll be saying the same as myself, that every leader I've ever worked with, they all need to slow down.
Yeah.
It's almost like, okay, first off, take this pill. This will get you to slow down. It's like almost like a slow down, chill pill to just be more aware, be more conscious, check in with yourself, So it's almost going back to some spiritual practices, which is, I know, a bit woo-woo for leadership. And what's even more woo-woo, which I'm going to share with you because it's jumped into my head, is the third eye. So that's something that, you know, from a spiritual context, the third eye has closed down because it hasn't been used for centuries and centuries and centuries. And that was our seeing eye. And I sort of link intuition with the third eye to some extent, you know, that, and I know it's woo-woo, so I'll get off the woo-woo topic, but my point is that actually we're not using our spidey senses in the way we perhaps could be.
You know, I don't mind whether, you know, if someone wants to refer to their third eye as something that really works for them or metaphor, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's just what is it that allows you to tune in?
Yes.
And you know, if that's whatever that is, which it brings you down and allows you to get to a different place, that's the most important thing. Because when you're constantly paying attention to your phone, when you're constantly being diverted by something going ping and an email coming in, you're never going to allow yourself that time. And my big question to lots of leaders is you know, is the big difference that you're going to make really in getting back on our email, or actually by just taking a breath, sitting back and going, okay, what really matters right now? And it's never going to be answering that email.
No,
Ever.
no. Or looking at another spreadsheet or
No,
yeah, you're right. 100% you're right. And a lot of it is that it's this connection, you know, where when we're not as connected, even though you showed your phone, email, same time email, all this sort of stuff, we're not as connected as we could be.
yes. And I think that when you're not really in yourself, you then can't tell, look, is this bias? Is this fear? Is this anger? And part of understanding what intuition is also understanding what those things are, so that you're not dragged into something which actually is not your intuition, but you're thinking that it is. Because lots of people say to me, oh, yes, but I'd use it and it all went wrong. And I'm going, well, if you use it and it all went wrong, it probably wasn't your intuition.
It might have just been your intuition without the facts, as you were saying earlier.
Could have been, or maybe, you know, there was stress in there, or there was tiredness, or, you know, all these things. And then we'll say, oh, it's intuition. But actually, there's other stuff interfering. So it's worth understanding what's going on for yourself so that these, I mean, I know, don't ask me to be intuitive at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I'm much better first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
When I'm not all cluttered up and tired.
I'm just trying to get in my mind's eye a picture of what exceptional intuition, you know, a leader that has got exceptional intuition looks like, and how they act and behave. I know you listed off all those, the environmental, the decision, intuition, non-expert, temporal, create, you know, all those lists that you gave me and shared with the listeners. You must have seen some good examples of this. I know you talked about your colleague that gave you the feedback. Have you seen some other examples of really exceptional intuition exhibited by a leader recently?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a woman, and she was helping someone else prep for an important presentation that they were doing internally. And she was a general manager of Europe. And I just watched her say, there's something missing here. What is it? I'm not sure what it is. You're going to need to give me a little bit of time. And then she came up with, this is what's missing.
Right.
And I went, that was so spot on. It was absolutely spot on. So, you know, and I remember being super impressed that that's how she did it. And I sat in the room, it's only last year, and just thinking, that is exactly it in a nutshell. You realize that something's missing, you get the niggle, you tune into what the niggle is, and then you play the niggle back. So, and the niggle is the intuition.
Yeah. So that's a feeling, of course, it's a feeling state. So you've got to
Yeah,
go with the feeling of, okay, I've been spiked.
yeah,
And then you've got to be curious enough to sort of pull on that
brilliant.
thread. A bit like the old Harry Potter, Dumbledore getting those thoughts out and having a
Yes,
look at those thoughts and saying, okay, let's have a look at this and see where's that coming from? What's that about?
absolutely. And I, you know, how many people actually allow that? And lots of people, when they have niggles, they take it the wrong way and they start then digging at the person rather than digging at the concept of, you know, okay, there's something missing. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
And just sitting with it. And if you don't know what the niggle is, you could just sit with it for a bit of time. You give yourself a bit of time. So I'm going to have the answer by the end of whenever it is. Because sometimes it's hard. You know, if it's a big question, if it's a big niggle, like should I move to LA or not move to LA, you're only going to plague everybody around you if you don't sit with it for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plague your friends and family. But if you say this is open ended, you're never going to make a decision. So then the intuitive piece is around the time. How long am I going to give myself to sit with this? Rather than the decision itself. Because when you have a big decision to make, it can be overwhelming. And so it's how do you break it down into smaller intuitive pieces is what I would recommend.
What about you personally then, Jess? Where has intuition really supported you career-wise, personally? Have you had any, real like, oh, wow, bang?
Oh, bang moment. Oh gosh, I
Using your intuition specifically.
yeah. I was interviewing someone who my office manager had already taken on, and she'd already offered the job to. And I was in the middle of the interview, and I went, "Oh, she's pregnant," and
You're not allowed to
I
say that nowadays.
I know,
No,
and I
I'm only
couldn't,
joking.
I know,
But
and I couldn't, I couldn't say to her, "Are you
yeah,
pregnant?" So
yes.
I said my question to her was, "Is there any reason that you wouldn't be able to do the job in a year's time as it currently stands?" But that's about as far as I can go.
Yeah, that's quite a clever question.
And she went, "What do you mean?" And I thought, "Oh shit, I'm right."
Yeah.
And I walked out of that interview and I said, "Listen, you take her on, she's pregnant, just know that." And I took her on. Sure enough, 10 weeks later, she said, "I'm pregnant."
Wow.
So, yes, and it really helped me. So, in a coaching situation last year, I was coaching someone who was absolute shoehorn in for a job. Everyone, a shoe in for a job, not a shoehorn, a
Yeah.
shoe in for a job. Everyone said that they were going to get this job. And I woke up one Saturday morning and went, they haven't got the job. And I shot off a text saying, "I'm thinking of you." And I got a text back 30 seconds later saying, "I didn't get the job. Could we talk?" And so, yes, it's, you know, I wouldn't say, "Oh, guess what? I had this big intuition about you not getting the job," but it just helped me do my job better.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and sometimes, in a coaching session, I've said, this is way off topic, but I just want to introduce this thought. Tell me I'm on one and we'll move off it.
Yep.
And I've introduced my thought, and it's been the right thought. Now, how did I do that? I can't tell you. But I think that the thing is to trust it, and to learn to trust it by doing the small things before you do the big things. So I
I,
would,
I love the question. I love the inquiry to get
yeah,
there. It's the sort of it's an inquiry, isn't it? Sort of like I'm sensing this, I'm
yeah,
feeling this, well, how are you feeling?
yeah, exactly. Tell me I'm way off beam.
Yeah.
This is what I'm getting. And what's quite interesting is also when people are blocked, before they tell me that I'm blocked, I often see in my mind's eye a block. Or if I know there are options, get in my mind's eye, it's always the same image, which is why I trust it. I'll see a pathway and a gate. I'll see a gateway, and it'll be through the gateway, and I see 3 options or 5 options or how many options. And there's always one path which is a better path than the other path. And so then it's up to between me and my coachee about, okay, what are they sensing that the better path is, and
Yeah.
how am I reacting to that, to what they say? Am I getting that this is the better path along with them? So yeah, it's just how. So I think that one of the important things is for anyone who wants to use intuition a bit more is to become aware of their own internal symbology,
Yes.
because we all have an internal symbology, and what is that? So I just know that those are, so my big concrete block, which I have to take a little mental walk around. Okay, it's a big block. So I'm sensing that with someone. I'm going, oh, here's my block again.
I
We've
love
got
it'd be great if they actually did light up. I don't know whether you ever saw the kids movie Inside Out, which was all about the emotions and feelings. It was very, very cleverly scripted and animated, and it went inside what was happening
yes,
with
I did.
the
I did.
chemical
Brain.
cascade,
Yes. Yeah.
and I just think it would be great if sort of like intuition would light up, like, oh, hang on, we've got intuition going off. Hang on, something else is going off, so it would be great if that were the case, but it's not. But without that, what you've been talking about is being curious, notice,
Yeah.
get tuning in, like really tuning into yourself and your feelings and noticing when those feelings pop up. The spidey senses is
Yeah.
my best way of articulating that, and that's what I would sort of say to people is say, use your spidey senses more. Just almost like sling the fishing
Yes.
rod out and just go fishing with your team or an individual to check in with them. It's almost like, okay, let's just see what goes on here. Did I land that correctly or not? Is that true for you or not? And then you'll get feedback, and then you'll get better at gauging whether that's true or not. That's how it's almost like you were saying earlier that you've been really getting into your weightlifting and stuff. It's a bit like if, after you've been doing that for a period of time, you get used to that movement.
Yes.
Same with intuition,
Yes.
you can build that strength as a strength.
But I think there's also something important, Jim, which is, what's your attention being drawn to in this world?
Yes.
So if I was thinking, oh, okay, gosh, what's my intuition telling me about this thing right now? I look around and I go, what's my intuition what am I being drawn to? And I go, oh, look, the light on my printer's flashing. Okay, so flashing. What's flashing mean to me? Flashing. There's something in it. There could be danger in it. Ah, okay, flashing. But flashing means pay attention. So I do like also paying attention to what's in the external environment as a way into your internal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then if I got flashing, okay, pay attention, and then in my mind's eye I get, ooh, a big nice stop sign, I'll go, this is not a good idea. And then I go, okay, what's my energy bit like for this? And I go, oh, I'm feeling a bit heavy. But if I go, oh, my energy's feeling light for it, I'll go, okay, there's some dangers in this potentially, but perhaps it's the right thing to do. I need some more information.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So that's where it's worth going, okay, what's actually going on for me here in all of this? And to use everything that you've got. I interviewed one person for my book, and she, for example, said she had someone in her team as a team leader, and she was incredibly good a marketeer. And she had this person in her team who was good looking and came over as a great big doer, really good at relationships. And then one day she had this image of her carrying him on a big crucifix, like she was Jesus Christ and lugging him along.
Wow.
And she's going, oh my God, this guy's a dead weight.
Wow.
He's really good at all the schmoozy stuff, but my God, he doesn't deliver anything. And she said, and that was the cue for her to go, right, he's out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, how are you seeing things? And then, if you can't get a metaphor because you go, oh gosh, I'm not that kind of person, you go along to Chat GPT, ask
Yeah.
Chat GPT what it pops up. And you are not responsible. It's not the metaphor itself, it's your reaction to the metaphor. It's the interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The AI stuff is a
Yeah.
fascinating environment. Actually, I was only recently introduced to all that stuff via my youngest son, Sam, who, finished his business degree a year or so ago. And he just said, have you got this app? And I said, no. What's that? And he explained it to me, and I've been having some fun with it. So asking it questions and, just getting some answers, some interesting different answers, and
Yeah.
looking for what's the latest data, what's this information saying. It's a really interesting tool, and it's a tool, of course.
Yeah. But interestingly, your intuition is the thing that will set you apart. AI, everybody has access to.
Of course. Yeah.
Your intuition is something different. And looking at the data and pulling it apart, you can, when managers are asked, do you use your intuition? About 50% of them say yes. When middle managers are asked, 62% of them say yes, it's important to them. When C-suite leaders are asked, 75% of them say it's important to them. And when CEOs are asked, 99% of them say it's important to them and to
Wow.
their decision making. So you can see as you go up the greasy ladder, so it becomes more important to you. But nobody will tell you that.
No.
And nobody will say this is a skill that you need to hone if you really want to get to the top. So pay attention to it.
No, I'm delighted that you've done all the legwork personally for me, because that would be, I wouldn't enjoy that process. So thank you, and thank you for everyone else that'll get to read your book when it's available. So you're talking sort of early next year, the book will be launched.
Spring 24.
24. Okay. And when it is launched, we'll come back and have another conversation for sure, Jess, because today we haven't really got, once it's out, then people can then get a copy of it, which is fantastic. And thank you for today as well. Before we check out, there are a couple of questions. So one, and I know I've asked you a few questions already about your book and your latest book that's launched next year. I'm curious as to who on your leadership journey has influenced you along the way. So have there been specific people? Is it a mum or dad, or is it, your husband, or is it someone that you've worked for, etc., or is it someone else that, a leader somewhere, a sports person? I don't know. So what's influenced you and in your leadership journey along the way?
There are some people who I've met, and I remember, there's the terrible who you just think I never want to work for. Let me give you a contrast. And I remember doing one of my first team events, 20 years, more than 20 years ago, and going into this room, and the CEO was in the room, and they were trying to decide, did they set up a second HQ? I mean, and think about it, a second head office is going to cost a fortune.
Yeah.
And why would you do it? I mean, it's an absolutely nuts idea.
Yeah, it is, because an HQ is an HQ. There's only one of them normally.
One of them.
Yeah.
And this senior team went through a whole rigmarole process of, brainstorming and flip charts and what have you. And I watched the CEO, and he was struggling behind a pillar, and no one went forward to help him. And I thought, and they did vote to have a second HQ. And I thought, they really, really dislike you. And the reason they want a second HQ is that you're not in it. And that's exactly what happened. And guess what? He was fired a couple of years later, and they shut down the second HQ.
Wow.
But, you just, on the other hand, this is me going back to the small stuff. I remember watching someone very senior in the British Navy and thinking, I could work for you. The most junior person in the room, he went and got a chair for. The second most junior person in the room, he asked, do you need a cup of coffee or some water? Can I get you something? And you just go, that's the small stuff. I would work for you.
Yeah.
I'd follow you anywhere. And it was very interesting because I've often had the thought, how on earth did I get into this room? And I said to him, have you ever thought, how did I get into this room? And he said, no, never. And I thought, wow, that's self-assurance.
Yeah, that's big self-esteem.
Well, I think it was just self-assurance. He
Yeah.
felt, I've often had doubts about what am I doing here? But actually, I think that's good on the intuition front because you too short and you'll screw it all up. And you need a little bit of humility and a little bit of check-in and a little bit of, hey, I need to verify this. I've got a hypothesis, got a working hypothesis. That's what my gut's telling me. But is it really the case?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, I've taken little bits from everywhere. My mum was a stay-at-home housewife. My dad was a freelance. My husband has always said, no, I don't want a team. He's a great individual player and he loves supporting other people. He's a very considerate man who listens a lot and is mortified if he doesn't get it right.
Yeah.
So I owe him a huge debt because whenever I've said, I want to work my socks off, I want to work 100% of my time, and I mean 100%, he's gone, great, good idea. And when I've said, I want to take a back seat now, he's gone, great, good idea. So I think that's what you really want in anyone as a partner or as a leader, is someone who supports your choices.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Yeah.
And
Okay. And then I sort of snuck a sort of a heads up around this next question, which is, what would be your leadership desert island book? So you're stuck on a desert island somewhere and you don't know whether you're going to get rescued or not. So would it be a book? I think you alluded to a trilogy, so I can accept a trilogy. But you mentioned something that I wasn't aware of. So what is that trilogy? So please explain, Jess.
So I found it hard to, when I'm writing a book, I can't read.
Right.
And I think it's because I can't do with more input while I'm trying to do output.
Yeah.
And so it's been such a pleasure to pick up books again, and which are not about intuition and they're not academic papers, because they are a real struggle. And so I've been reading Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall trilogy, which was turned into the BBC have done them, and absolutely fabulous. And it's about the life and times of Thomas Cromwell, who was Henry VIII's right-hand man, master secretary.
Right.
And you want to know anything about politics, intrigue, good, bad leadership, pick them up. They're absolutely awesome. And I've just started I've just finished Bring Up the Bodies, which is a second one, when Anne Boleyn has been executed. And I've just started a third one. And he can't read the runes. So he's very politically astute, but he can't read the runes for himself. And there's all these little hints that things are not going to work out well for him. And he can't read it. And you want to go, oh, wake up.
Yeah.
But you know the end. It's not a good one.
Not for Anne Boleyn.
Well, all for Cromwell.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend the Wolf Hall trilogy by Hilary Mantel.
I've got that on my list of things to get at some point, because I've got a ton of books to read, but that's not unusual for people like us in this world, in the coaching world. Well, it's been a sheer delight, Jess, to have you on the podcast for this episode. And I really thank you so much for your insight. And I'm really looking forward to being able to dive into the book when it's available. So where can people get hold of you? What's the best place? Email address, website, etc. So can you just rattle those off? I will put them on the video for those that are going to be watching on video, but what's the best contact details for people to get hold of you?
You can always find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I've got just started a new group who are interested in intuition, because quite often something happens or you get a coincidence or you just go, oh, I'm not sure what to make of this. So if anybody wants help with unpacking something, I'm absolutely delighted to do that. So LinkedIn is one place, and my email is Jess, Jess, at webpsyched. That's
Right.
WEBPSYCHED, webpsyched.com. That's the easiest one. And I thought I was being so clever finding that name, and it's been such a curse.
A curse from what perspective?
But you say website, and everybody writes down website.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine. It's a place to find me. That's it. I think the
And
important thing is a relationship
and
always.
the group that you mentioned about the intuition group, is that for people to join, anyone to join, or is
Anyone.
okay?
Open for
So
anyone.
what group is that via your website?
No, it's just LinkedIn. It's a
Oh, that's
LinkedIn group.
LinkedIn. Okay, so they need to find you on LinkedIn, connect with you there, and then join that group as well.
Or just look for intuition at work and say they want to join, and they'll find me.
Okay. So I will put those up on a link
Okay.
at the back end of this podcast. So thank you again.
Oh no, thank you, Jim. It's just been lovely chatting with you. It's like no years have gone past.
Well, they don't seem as though they have, Jess. You still look as young, and your energy is still there, which I that's what we spoke about it before we hit the record button. So like energy attracts like energy. There's an energy that I am attracted to in you, and I think I'm hoping that it might be the same, but there is an energy, and it's been a great conversation, and I'm really grateful that we've been able to get together, get a date in the diary, and I look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I really appreciate your time, the time together. All right.
No, it's been
Believe
great.
2 hours have whizzed past.
It's
Okay.
it's crazy.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Remember to share and subscribe to the EI Guru podcast, and if you have any questions, you can post them once you've subscribed. You can follow me on Instagram at the EI Guru, and you can get more information from my website, theeiguru.com. Have a fantastic week. Bye for now.